Hello,
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. And firstly, thank you so much for doing this, ma'am. It's such a pleasure to have you. And I have your book right here with me. Um,
Thank
honestly, this is a
you.
little bit of a fan moment for me because I've been reading your books for a very long time.
Oh,
And
thank you. That's so nice to hear that. It's lovely to hear that.
so I think your books have had some influence in terms of how I've shaped up as a feminist. I read your book the first time I got out of school, and I read The Palace of Illusions then. And I was amazed. I really was in awe, complete awe. So,
Thank you.
so
That makes it's so special when I hear from readers like you because that's the hope. That's the hope behind all the effort I put into books. So it's magical for me to hear that they've had some effect.
no, absolutely. It's firstly, again, I'd like to thank you, and it's super surreal for me because when I was growing up, I was listening to my grandmother's stories of the bravery of Abhimanyu, the dilemmas and the selflessness of Arjun, the wisdom of Krishna. Even when I saw Ramanand Sagar's Mahabharat, they rarely showed any women, their trials and tribulations.
Right.
And then yeah, exactly. And then when I read your book, I was like, oh, you gave Panchali a voice. There's another way of looking at this epic.
Thank
And
you. That is exactly what I hoped people would think when they were reading, right? The women who only appeared in little moments, but who are
yeah,
there throughout the story. We don't see them, we don't hear their voices, and we certainly don't learn their thoughts. So I'm so
no.
glad that that worked for you.
Not just for me, ma'am. I think like you have so many people reading your books. There are so many people who are your fans. It's not just for me. I think there is a host of people out here
Thank
who
you.
really appreciate it. Um,
Thank you.
Ma'am, a lot of your works actually reimagine women from mythology. Be it, of course, the Forest of Enchantments, where it's actually Sitayan and not Ramayan, and with Draupadi, um, you've retold epics from their perspective, which is, I believe, so very powerful. Um, what made you really start writing about them in the first place, and why do you think it's important?
Well, just like you were saying, I also grew up with the stories of the epics. And I think that is so wonderful about our culture that we have these ancient texts and they are so powerful, right? But just like you, I noticed that these stories are all pointing to or focusing on the men, the
Yeah.
heroics of the men, the wars, the battles, even the weapons that they learn to use. They're all given so much space, but the
Mm.
women are not given much space. And even when they are seen, like Draupadi in the Sabha, where she is going to be disrobed by Dushasan,
Mhm.
they are seen as victims of circumstance. And even Sita in the Ramayana, although she is greatly admired, she's seen as a victim, a woman who's abducted and then she's kept imprisoned and then she is sent away to the forest, right? And I just felt that this was not the truth. There's something else hidden here. So I started doing research and I researched for a long time because, these two texts are very dear to my heart and I respected them a lot. So, but as I went back to the original and not to the popular versions that we are exposed to either in popular retellings in books or popular movies or TV serials, those have created the wrong impression of these very heroic women who were smart, who were brave, who did not give up when circumstances seemed to be allied against them, who inspired the people around them and who, when in difficulty, stood up and said, I'm not going to give in. Instead, I'm going to take the best option. When we think of Sita especially, left in the forest, heavily pregnant for no fault of her own. She doesn't give in. She doesn't go into depression. She doesn't just, rail at Ram. She says, my job is to bring up these two babies. That's what I'm going to focus on. And that kind of, at once, endurance, but also determination, I had not found them anywhere in any other books. And I said, well, I'm going to write my books where these women are in the center. And we see these characteristics. And these characteristics, as I contemplated them, were very, what shall I say? They were very aspirational for me. They really, I don't know, they did something to me as I was writing the book. And I felt if they can do that to others, if they can inspire others, if they can inspire women and especially young women and girls, and, I think that would be a great thing. And that is one of the richest things our culture can give to young women today. Strong women's voices, strong women making it through difficult times, not perfect women. I don't ever try to show any of my heroines, neither Panchali, Draupadi in Palace of Illusions, nor Sita in Forest of Enchantments, nor in my latest novel, historical novel, The Last Queen, Rani Jinda. They all have their flaws because we're all human. And that's an important message to give girls. We don't have to try to be perfect. We just try to be the best we can be.
Well, that's amazing. Such a nice message to give out to the young girls of today. But I wanted to ask you, do you think how female characters are portrayed in epics, are they still determining and shaping how women live their lives today? And in that context, of course, how do you see your work? And you did partly answer that question for me, but do you think these epics are still determining how women live their lives right now?
Yes, they are. And, we really have to, when we talk about women and girls in India, we can't just think about, and we should not just think about the urban elite, okay? Because they are just a very small part of women and girls. The lives of women and girls in India go far beyond that. And as soon as we get out of that little segment, yes, our cultural values, which are often determined by our understanding of our epics and our mythology and our Puranas, they definitely affect women's lives. They affect women's self-images also, which is just as important because it's not just what society is telling people, women, that they should do or they should be like, but women begin to believe those things. So if society is telling women, look at Ma Sita, see how she just listened to everything and she was meek and mild and she just followed her husband to the forest and did not create any waves. So you must be like that. That begins to really have a very strong effect on young women, and it continues as the woman grows older. Now, if someone says to her, no, no, look at the story, and this is what I'm trying to do. And I'm so happy because now the books are translated into different languages, including Hindi, so that this larger community of women and girls can read about them. And so these books are saying, no, no, look at it. Look really what happens. Ram is going to the forest. He actually tells Sita, you please stay here in Ayodhya. Be a good wife, take care of the in-laws. And Sita says, no, I love you. My place as a wife is with you. If you are going to go on your adventure, I want to go too. So look at the agency. And that's what I've tried to go back to. And that agency is actually in Valmiki. We've just forgotten it, or perhaps because of patriarchal retellings, that has just been removed from the retellings. But really, Sita's like, she has a fight with Ram. She says, I'm not listening to you. I'm going with you. You can't stop me. It's my right. So you see how a proper understanding can change the powerful effect that these epics are having, because they do. The epics, the myths, they all continue to shape women's visions of themselves and shape what they're able to do in society. So it's very important to give these alternate tellings, which are still based on the original, and to show how it wasn't the way people have been telling women all these years. It wasn't the way that if you are a strong woman like Draupadi, oh, she caused the war. That's not true. And many things caused the war. You cannot blame it on a strong woman.
No, that's great, ma'am, because also whenever my grandmom told me the story and I read it, I was in a CBSE board. It's a mandatory reading in your sixth grade or seventh grade. I can't remember, but I never read this aspect of it, and Sita was also always considered as a meek, obedient wife. Um, the fact that she fought with Ram to come to the forest with him, that is never mentioned, or at least I never read about it. So,
Right. I didn't read about it until I did my research also.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
lost over the ages of
yeah,
retellings.
yeah, absolutely. And also, I was thinking, do you think we remember, or the epics remember, women who show agency like Supnakha very unkindly, because Supnakha also showed that agency, and then we portray her as a very ugly character in the epics. So,
Right.
what are your thoughts on this?
That's a great question. And that is why in the Forest of Enchantments, I'm not only telling Sita's story, but I'm telling the stories of all the important women, the important, powerful women who decide to take on agency, right? And there, definitely Surpanakha is one of the major ones. But there are others also. There's Mandodari, there's Ahalya. All of them they become very important. And Sita actually says, my story is not complete unless their stories are also told. And so the way that I have shown Surpanakha in the Forest of Enchantments is, and really this is objective, what is her fault? She sees a man, she falls in love with him, she's attracted to him at least, let's say, and she says to him, well, I would like to have a relationship with you. Is that in fact wrong? All through our epics, if we take a look, men are always doing that to the women. They see a woman, they like her. They may have several other wives, but it's okay for them to say, oh, I see you, I'm in love with you, let's have a relationship. That's perfectly acceptable. And the book just questions. And I'm never trying to, what shall I say, determine for readers how they should read my books. I'm just presenting them with the situation. And I want the readers, the women, the girls, I hope the men also, and especially the young men who are going to be a great part of the future of how women will be looked at. Their attitudes will be very important. So I want to ask them, is it really wrong? Think of it from Supernaka's side. Think of it from her culture. In her culture, it's perfectly okay for women to go up to a man that they like and, express their emotions. Was her was her action so bad that she had to have her nose and ears cut off? Just a question. And the reader has to answer it for himself or herself.
Mm,
Draupadi is another example. She's an even bigger example because she's strong-willed, because she has an influence over her
mm,
husbands,
mm,
because they listen to her, and she argues her points well. She has been looked at negatively overall
yeah,
through
yeah,
the ages. She's been looked at negatively. And, one of the things people say about her is, oh, she has 5 husbands. What a terrible thing. All right, excuse me. How many husbands do all these men? I mean, how many wives do all these
right,
men have? They have lots and lots of. Okay, all
yeah,
right. That is the custom of the country, let's say. But still, they don't look at the fact that she didn't really choose to have those 5 husbands. In
Yeah,
fact, I'm
yeah,
sure
exactly.
it was quite a challenge for her to manage, all 5 brothers. But she does it. She does it very intelligently so that they all love her and there's peace in the home. And
Yeah,
but we only remember the negative things. We only say, "Oh, she caused the war," or she's so revengeful. She wants to wash her hair in the Shasan's blood. Right?
yeah,
We don't remember all the other places where she appears, where in the midst of being disrobed in the sabha, she is able to keep her dignity. And in the Palace of Illusions, I have her realize something very important, which I think she realizes in the original epic because she is able to control her emotions and focus on God. And she says that, why should I be ashamed? They're trying to shame her, right? As often women are shamed. So they're trying to shame her. They're trying to remove her clothes. And she says at a certain point, why should I be ashamed? Am I doing anything shameful? Or are they doing what's shameful? And for me, when I wrote that, it was like the words came to me from Draupadi. And I was like, I saw something that I hadn't seen before. I was like, yes, why should she be ashamed? She's not
yeah,
doing anything wrong. Why should any woman be ashamed if harm is done to her, if violence is done to her, if she is abducted, if she is ill treated, if she's the victim of a crime? Why does society say she's at fault? She was
yeah,
wearing the wrong clothes. She was laughing too loudly. She shouldn't have been out there at the right at the wrong time, right? That is
mm,
often
yeah,
what
yeah.
society says. But this shaming of the victim, I think Draupadi stands up against it. And I certainly hope that that is a message that our girls and women will take from her.
No, absolutely. Your point is very pertinent about how the shaming of the victim happens, and in fact, we should spotlight the perpetrator, and they should be shameful for the act that they're doing. So, um, and you said, the words came to you from Draupadi. So I actually wanted to discuss a little more about your process of creating and writing such powerful characters who hitherto have been in the margins till now.
Yeah, well, that process is mysterious. First of all, yeah, I would like to say I know how it happens, but it's kind of mysterious and powerful. But I know one thing I have to do is I really have to spend a lot of time immersed in these characters. I have to read everything I can find about them. I'm very visual. So if there are images of these characters, and of course, there are so many paintings of Sita and Draupadi that was a big um, inspiration. I got a lot of ideas from seeing them, but also how I saw them, right? How I saw them made me question things, right? Even just when Sita is going to the forest, in all of the traditional depictions, there's Ram, there's Lakshman, and Sita's kind of being protected in between them. But actually, Sita is very strong. If you read and if we just have to go back to the correct sources. If you look at the Adbhut Ramayana, it shows that Sita was a warrior princess. She was trained to be a warrior as she's growing up in Mithila. And she is so strong that the bow, the magic bow, the Haradhanu, which has to be which has to be strung in order for someone to marry her, they have to string that bow and only Ram manages to string it. All the great kings come, they can't even pick it up off of the ground. Even Ravan cannot pick it up off of the ground. He also goes and tries his luck. But there are examples in the Adbhut Ramayana where, Sita, she's cleaning the floor and this bow is lying there. So she picks it up with one hand, she cleans under it. Sometimes she plays with the bow, it becomes like a toy to her, a toy horse. And so, I mean, look at the strength, but that's not shown in these images. So the images still had a lot of effect on me because they made me think. It's the same with in the Last Queen, my newest novel. The cover is a picture, a painting of Rani Jinda. And when I looked at that painting, it really inspired me to write about this woman because she is so stoic. She has so much personality, and terrible things happened to her. She too had to put up with a lot. The British were against her. She is the uh, queen, the last queen of Punjab. She is the wife of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and the British go through a lot of plotting to get the kingdom away from her. And of course, unfortunately, they're helped by some of the men of her court who want power for themselves. So she went through a lot. But when I looked at that, and when I looked at that painting, I saw that how she preserved her dignity through all of that. She never lost faith in herself. And that's a great message for our women and our girls, isn't it? Bad things will happen. That's the nature of the world. Life isn't always going to give us what we want, but how we deal with that, right? How we reach inside and find the strength to endure. Endurance is important in the lives of all these women. Not meek and mild putting up with what happens, but endure like a tree endures, like a rock endures, like a mountain endures. That is the strength of the earth, Mother Earth. And that is the strength of all these women and of all of us. I think we're part of that same energy, the Mother Earth.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Um, and when you talked about how the nobody talks about Sita being a warrior princess, certainly you must have faced a lot of pushback from the Puritans or a lot of apprehension when you were writing about her picking up the bow and sweeping under it, because we don't talk about it. So how did you deal with it? Did you get any pushback? And if you did, how did you deal with it?
That's a great question. Before I started writing Palace of Illusions, I was, very nervous. And all the well-wishers in my life were also very nervous. And my husband, who was generally very supportive of my writing, he was very concerned. He said exactly what you said. He said, what about the pushback? What about you? People will think you're messing with a text, a sacred text, and you're just, changing things the way you want. So, and I did not want people to think that, not because I'm afraid of pushback. Okay, let's be honest, I am afraid of pushback, but not so afraid that I won't write, because that's my life's passion. That's, I have to do it. So I thought to myself two things. I thought, what is my intention here? I don't have some quote unquote feminist agenda, as people who don't like feminism like to think of feminist agenda. It's not like I'm trying to put down the men. That is not my intention. And in fact, in society, that is not a good intention too. And it's not necessary. For women to rise, it's not like men have to fall. Women can rise all on their own, and men can also rise on their own, and then we can be partners, and that is a strong society. So I said, that is not my agenda. I want to show how wonderful and complex Draupadi is and how interesting and fun. But it's not like I'm putting down the Pandavas. It's not like I want to say that they were terrible people, they were useless people. They were not. They were great heroes also.
Yeah.
And in fact, Draupadi's best friend is male, Krishna, right? And he is the one with whom she has, and from whom she learns the most important things. So I think that was very clear. When I was writing The Forest of Enchantments, my agenda is not to put down Lord Ram. That is not at all necessary. In order for me to show Sita, Mother Sita's greatness, I don't need to put anyone down. She is great all by herself. So I think that was very clear to me. that everyone is respected, but the focus is on the women and on their strength, which has been forgotten over the years. The second part is I said to myself, I'm going to do like the absolute best research that I can do. I'm not going to change any of the major facts about the lives of these women. So I went back and I really did in-depth research in the many variations of the Mahabharata and the even more variations of the Ramayana, because there are a lot. So starting with Valmiki and then Valmiki for Ramayana, Vyasa for Mahabharata. And then in the Ramayana field, I looked at the Kamba Ramayana from the south, the Adbhut Ramayana, the Ramayana of Kritibas. There was a bunch of Ramayans. There were a bunch of Ramayans that I looked at. And every major fact comes from one or the other of these Ramayans. Okay. I did the same with the Mahabharata. So I felt that no one can say this is not authentic, because it is authentic. It's just that over the ages, it has been forgotten. These original sources have been forgotten. So having done that, having done proper research and having a positive intention, I said, that's all I can do. The rest is it's in God's hands. And yeah, I was nervous. But I have been so blessed that the responses to both the books have been very, very positive. I feel very blessed. And I hope it is because people see that the books are written with a respectful attitude, but they're written with the hope that they will inspire girls, women, and as I said, men also, to create a society that is much more equal and that appreciates its women.
The story does resonate with a lot of people. And honestly, I think I read The Forest of Enchantments in maybe 2 days. And I'm not a very fast reader, but I did read this in 2 days and I just couldn't put this down. So kudos to you, ma'am. Of course, this is absolutely fantastic. And so I wanted to ask you, of course, you've written The Last Queen. That's your latest book. Is there any other historical female figure that you're going to write about next? Could you tell us a little more about your next writing project?
Yeah, I'm just getting started on my next writing project because, as you know, The Last Queen just came out. So I'm still kind of in Rani Jinda's world and still thinking about her courage and still thinking about the way in which, especially at the end of that book, she gets back at the British. She has a great moral victory at the end of the book, even though physically she is not victorious, but morally she's victorious. So I keep thinking about that. So I've become, through this process, very interested in India's history. So Rani Jinda's time is in the 1800s, right? So it's in 1830s, 1840s, that period, 1850. But I wanted to next explore what happens when India does become independent. So that's the period that I'm really, really interested in. And I'm very interested in showing the lives of women at that time. In which fields did they excel? Where did they stand next to the men? How did they help? How did they participate in bringing independence to India? I think that's something that I want to explore next. So it's not going to be about one woman, but it's going to be about many women in the world, women in that time, and how they made a really significant difference, how they managed to achieve some significant goals and break some barriers at that time. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, as am I. Unfortunately, again, our traditional pedagogy does not focus. I did history in school and political science in college, but again, I've never read so much about the situation of women, except for, of course, Sarojini Naidu and the prominent women that were part of the movement. But other than that, we even the feminist movement in India, we focus on the men, which I find very strange because we don't have literature or data on the women of India. So this is
Yeah,
going to
well,
be very
you are so right. And it's so ironic, right? That history has really become his story, right? Instead of
yes.
her story also. And that's why, no, that's why I have become very interested, at least at this time in my life, to explore mythology, to explore history, to bring out her story in each of these cases.
That's fantastic because on International Women's Day we are focusing on telling her story and getting people and award-winning authors and poets like you because we believe that um, stories have the power to change beliefs and actions and move towards gender equality. And there we find that there is a huge gender gap in storytelling as well. There aren't a lot of women telling their own stories, either on paper or on even movies. For example, we don't have a lot of women in this field, and so we'd like to thank you for doing what you do, and also for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, ma'am. Um, and I'm sure
Absolutely
people
my
feel the
pleasure.
same.
You folks do such a great job bringing inspiration to girls, to young women. It's really something, you help in so many ways. You really give a hand to someone who is needing that extra bit of assistance, that extra bit of inspiration. So important. And I'm so happy to hear you say that stories do that too, because I really believe that the stories we hear, the stories we read, the stories we see on the screen, my hope is that there will be lots and lots of positive women's roles and strong women's roles and stories that show these women succeeding in their complex but ultimately happy lives. And
Yeah.
I want girls and women to feel that yes, if I strive, society will help me. It will not pull me down, that there is a bright future for me right now
Yeah.
in India, in the world. I so want that to happen. That's very important for me.
But I completely agree with this. And again, thank you for inspiring us all with your stories, with your work, and for joining us today and giving us so much time of your time. So thank you, ma'am.
You're
And
very welcome. Thank you for having me.
of course, our pleasure, really. And I hope you and your family are keeping safe. I know America is pretty badly hit with Corona, so I hope you're keeping safe.
Thank
And
you. Thank you. Same to you. I wish, all the best to
thank
you
you.
and your
Thank you so much.
family.
Thank you. All right. Have a great day, ma'am. Take care. And
Okay,
we'll
you
talk
too.
soon.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.